So let me tell you about the day my neighbor tried to clean up his view and accidentally took down half the block. Yeah, I'm not exaggerating. I mean actual power lines, sparks, chaos, the whole cinematic package. All because he thought one ugly cable in my yard was ruining his backyard aesthetic. Now, I live in this older neighborhood, the kind where nothing is symmetrical, nothing is updated, and the utility lines look like someone threw spaghetti into the sky and said, "Good enough." Wires zigzagging, leaning poles, cables running at weird angles. And in the far back corner of my yard, there was this thick steel cable, anchored into the ground and stretching up at about a 45-degree angle across the alley to a massive utility pole. Not pretty, not subtle, definitely not something you'd put on a Pinterest board, but it had a job, a very important job. That cable was what they call a guy wire. Basically the thing keeping that giant pole from tipping over under the weight of transformers and power lines. You don't mess with it. You don't touch it. You definitely don't cut it. Enter my neighbor. Let's call him Brandon. And if you've ever had one of these guys next door, you already know the type. The kind of dude who treats property lines like polite suggestions. Always mid-project. Always improving something. Always just a little too confident in his own expertise. Brandon had this vision, right? He wanted a backyard that looked like a luxury outdoor magazine spread, so he starts building this massive pergola. I'm talking oversized beams, fresh cedar, brand new deck underneath. And here's the thing. None of it was permitted, no inspections, no approvals, just vibes and a Home Depot credit card. At first, I didn't really care. Not my yard, not my problem, until his project started creeping right up against my fence line. Like, right up against it, and suddenly that cable in my yard? Yeah, it became his problem. One Saturday morning, I hear a knock at my door. I open it, and there's Brandon, holding a pair of bolt cutters. Not small ones either. I mean heavy-duty, industrial-looking cutters. And he's smiling like he's about to do me a favor. He goes, "Hey man, quick heads up. I'm gonna snip that wire in your yard. It's kind of killing the view from my pergola." And I just stare at him for a second because I honestly thought he was joking. I go, "You're not serious, right?" And he shrugs, like it's no big deal. It's just a loose cable, looks ugly, doesn't seem connected to anything important. Now here's the moment where everything could have stopped, where logic could have stepped in. I told him, very clearly, that's not just a cable, that's holding up the main utility pole across the alley. You cut that, you're messing with structural tension. Things don't just fall neatly, they snap violently. And he just rolls his eyes, actually rolls his eyes, like I'm being dramatic. He goes, "Relax, I've done construction before." And that right there, that sentence, that's when I knew this was going sideways. Because there's a difference between knowing how to build a deck and understanding infrastructure physics. So I say, do not touch that wire. Very direct, no ambiguity. And he gives me that little smirk. You know the one. The "I hear you but I don't respect you" smirk, and just goes, "Yeah, we'll see." He turns around, walks back toward the fence, and I'm standing there thinking, did that just happen? So I go inside, immediately grab my phone, and call the utility company's emergency line. I tell them straight up, my neighbor is about to cut a guy wire connected to a main pole. And they're like, "Okay, we'll send someone out." But it's the weekend, response time slow. And now I'm stuck in this weird limbo, because I know what's about to happen. I just don't know exactly when. So I'm in my kitchen, looking out the window, and sure enough, there's Brandon, climbing over the fence, bolt cutters in hand, like he's about to prune a hedge or something, completely casual. No hesitation, no second thoughts. He positions the cutters around the cable, braces himself, and pulls. And then, ping. Not a snap, not a cut, a ping, sharp, loud, like a gunshot echoing through the alley. And the cable doesn't just fall, it whips backward, fast enough to slice through air like a blade. It misses him by inches. I mean literal inches. If he leaned half a step forward, we'd be telling a very different story. But that wasn't even the real problem. The real problem was what happened next. Across the alley, that utility pole, the one that cable was stabilizing, it moved. At first, just slightly, like a creak, a groan. And then you could actually see it, slowly leaning. And I remember thinking, oh no, because once that tension is gone, there's nothing holding it in place. And Brandon? He's just standing there, staring at the cable he just cut, like he's confused why it didn't just drop harmlessly to the ground. Then the pole shifts again, more aggressively this time, and now the wires connected to it start pulling, tightening, stretching like they're about to snap. And that's the moment where everything changes from bad idea to full-blown disaster. I open my back door and yell, "Get back!" But it's already too late. The lines connected to his house, the service line running into his roof, suddenly go taut, like a rope being yanked. And then, crack, his service mast, the metal pipe that feeds electricity into his home, gets ripped clean out of the side of his house, just torn straight off like it was nothing. Siding shatters, debris flies. And now there are sparks, actual sparks, raining down onto his brand new wooden deck. And Brandon? Yeah, the confidence? Gone, completely gone. He stumbles backward, staring at the damage like his brain is trying to catch up with reality. But again, it doesn't stop there. Because that leaning pole? It's still moving, still shifting, pulling every connected line tighter and tighter. And now the fiber optic cables, the ones strung across his backyard, they start snapping too. And when those go, they don't just fall, they whip violently. One of them lashes straight across his pergola, that brand new, expensive cedar structure, and just shatters beams like matchsticks. I mean, you could hear it breaking, sharp cracks, splintering wood, pieces dropping everywhere. And in less than maybe 10 seconds, his entire dream backyard went from showroom ready to disaster zone. And then everything goes quiet. No hum of electricity, no movement, just silence. The power's out, not just for him, but for the entire block, maybe more. And I'm standing there in my kitchen, just processing. Because I warned him. I told him exactly what would happen. And somehow, he still thought. He knew better. All right, pause the story for a second, because what just happened here? This isn't just some dumb neighbor mistake. This is actually a perfect example of how people walk straight into legal and psychological traps without even realizing it. According to standard procedure, that cable Brandon cut, that's classified as protected utility infrastructure, meaning it doesn't matter if it's sitting on your land, your neighbor's land, or hanging in the air like modern art. You don't touch it, ever. Those lines are covered under easements, which basically give utility companies the legal right to install and maintain equipment across private property. So from a legal standpoint, that wire was never his problem to solve. From a legal perspective, the moment he put those bolt cutters on that cable, he crossed into tampering with critical infrastructure. And yeah, that's not just a fine situation. That can escalate into full liability for damages. We're talking repairs, emergency response, even secondary damages caused by outages. It stacks up fast. But honestly, the legal side is only half the story. This is a psychological trap, a really common one. It's called overconfidence bias, when someone has just enough knowledge to feel like an expert, but not enough to understand the risks. Brandon builds a deck, maybe watches a few tutorials. Suddenly he thinks he understands structural systems. And when someone challenges that belief, he doubles down. And here's the kicker. Once he decided the wire was ugly and in his way, his brain reframed it as a problem that needed to be removed, not understood, not questioned, just eliminated. And that right there, that's how small decisions turn into very expensive mistakes. So yeah, that silence after everything snapped, it didn't last long, because within maybe 30 seconds, you start hearing it. Car doors, people outside, neighbors stepping out onto EIR porches like, what just happened? The kind of quiet panic where nobody has the full picture yet, but everyone knows something just went very, very wrong. And Brandon? He's standing in the middle of his yard, bolt cutters still in his hand, just turning in slow circles like if he looks at it from enough angles, it'll somehow undo itself. Then the smell hits, that sharp, metallic, almost burnt plastic smell from electrical arcing. And you can still see little flickers near where the service mast got ripped out. Nothing huge, but enough to remind you. This isn't over. Not even close. I step out into my yard, keeping my distance, and I yell over, "Don't touch anything. Seriously, don't even go near those lines." And this time, he listens. No sarcasm, no attitude, just this stunned nod like reality finally caught up to him. About 5 minutes later, you hear the first siren, then another, and then the utility trucks start rolling in. Big ones, with the company logos on the side, hazard lights flashing, guys hopping out already assessing the situation before the trucks even fully stop. And you can tell immediately. They're not confused, they know exactly what they're looking at. One of the crew guys walks straight to that severed cable, crouches down, looks at the clean cut, then slowly turns his head toward Brandon, and you can practically see the mood shift. Not concern, not curiosity, just frustration. He goes, "Who cut this?" And there's this pause, just long enough to be painful. Brandon kind of half raises the bolt cutters, like he's not even sure how to answer anymore, and says, I thought it was just. The guy cuts him off, no pun intended. That's a guy wire. You don't just cut a guy wire. And now more crew members are looking, pointing at the leaning pole, checking the lines, radios crackling. One of them's already calling for additional support. You hear words like unstable load, transformer stress, need a crane. This is escalating fast. Because here's the thing most people don't realize. Once that kind of tension system fails, you don't just put it back. You have to rebuild the entire setup safely, which means shutting everything down, stabilizing the pole, replacing damaged components. It's a process. They block off the alley, start setting up safety perimeters, and within maybe 20 minutes, you've got a full operation going. More trucks, more crew, a crane being scheduled, neighbors now fully gathered, whispering, watching, and Brandon is just there, stuck in the center of it all. At one point, one of the supervisors walks over to him with a clipboard, calm, but very direct, and starts asking questions: name, address, what happened, and you can see Brandon trying to explain it in a way that sounds less bad than it is, like maybe if he phrases it right, it won't sound like he intentionally cut a critical support line. But the problem is, there's no version of this story that works in his favor, because the evidence is literally in his hand. Bolt cutters, fresh cut, collapsed system. And then comes the part where it really sinks in. The supervisor says something along the lines of, "You're going to be liable for this." Not, "You might be," not, "We'll see." Just matter of fact. And you can see it hit him, like physically hit him. Because up until that moment, I don't think he fully understood the scale of what he'd done. Now fast forward a couple hours. The crane shows up. They stabilize the pole, remove the damaged sections, start replacing hardware. It's loud. It's slow. It's expensive looking even if you don't know the numbers yet. The entire block is still without power. People are checking phones, talking to each other, some annoyed, some just entertained, and every now and then, someone glances over at Brandon's yard, or what's left of it. That pergola? Gone. Like not even partially standing, just broken beams scattered across the deck. The deck itself? Scorched in spots from the sparks, siding on his house torn open where the mast used to be, wires hanging loose. It looks like a storm hit. Except the storm was one guy with a bad idea. By late afternoon, they finally start restoring power in sections, lights flicker back on. That familiar hum returns. But Brandon's house? Still dark, because his connection? Completely destroyed. That's a separate repair, on his dime. And then, a couple days later, the real aftermath shows up, not with sirens or sparks, but with paperwork. An invoice. Now I didn't see the exact document myself, but let's just say, word travels fast in a neighborhood like this, and numbers get around. Over $35,000. Yeah, new pole installation, crane operation, emergency crew overtime, replacement of damaged transformer components, line repairs, all of it. Itemized, all of it billed directly to him. And here's where it gets even worse. He tries to go through his homeowner's insurance, which, fair, that's what it's there for, right? Except, this wasn't an accident. This was intentional damage. And insurance companies? They're very, very clear about that line. So the claim gets denied flat out. Now he's not just dealing with repairs to his own house, which are already bad enough. He's also staring at a bill that could have been avoided by doing absolutely nothing. And the vibe after that? Completely different. No more loud construction noises. No more weekend projects. No more confident strutting around with tools. Just quiet. I'd see him occasionally, usually when he was coming or going, and he wouldn't even look my direction anymore. Which, honestly, I wasn't looking for an apology, but the shift was noticeable. That whole, "I know what I'm doing" energy? Gone, replaced with this kind of low-key avoidance. Like if he just keeps his head down, the whole situation might fade away. But it doesn't. Because every time you look at that yard, or what used to be that yard, it's a reminder. The pergola he wanted so badly, it's not just gone. It's the reason everything else fell apart. And that cable he thought was ruining his view. Well, now there's nothing left blocking it. Just a clear, unobstructed line of sight. Right across a very expensive mistake. So yeah, that's the story. And if you strip away the sparks, the noise, the whole cinematic collapse of a backyard dream, what you're really left with is something a lot simpler, and honestly, a lot more common than people think. Because the lesson here is, most disasters don't start with bad intentions. They start with small assumptions, quiet confidence, that little voice in your head that says, "I've got this, it's probably fine." And in Brandon's case, it wasn't about being malicious, it was about control, about wanting his space to look the way he imagined it, and anything that didn't fit that vision became a problem to eliminate. But here's where it gets real. The lesson here is, not everything you see is yours to change, even if it's on your property, even if it looks inconvenient, even if it's ugly. There are systems, invisible systems, legal, structural, technical, that are working behind the scenes. And the moment you ignore those systems, you're not just fixing something, you're interfering with a chain reaction you don't fully understand. And look, I get it. We all like to feel capable. We all like to believe we can handle things ourselves, especially in our own homes. But this is where ego sneaks in. Because this is a psychological trap. The moment you decide you already know enough, you stop asking the questions that would have saved you. You stop double-checking. You stop listening. And that's exactly what happened here. He didn't ask, "What is this wire?" He decided, "This wire is useless." And those two mindsets, they lead to very different outcomes. Now let's talk about the legal side again, just briefly. From a legal perspective, what he did falls into a category that most people never think about until it's too late. Interference with utility infrastructure. And the thing about that is, liability doesn't care about your intention, it cares about your action. He didn't mean to cause $35,000 worth of damage. But he did. And that's all the system needs to know. According to standard procedure, utility companies don't absorb those costs when there's clear evidence of tampering. They pass them on directly. And when insurance steps in, they're looking for one thing. Was this accidental? Or was this a deliberate act? And the second it's deliberate, you're on your own. Now zoom out for a second. Because this isn't just about one guy and one bad decision. This is about how we deal with things that inconvenience us. Do we understand them? Or do we remove them? Do we ask questions? Or do we assume we already have the answers? And yeah, sometimes it's just a cable. Sometimes it really is harmless. But sometimes it's the one thing holding everything together. And you don't find out which one it is until it's too late. The lesson here is respect what you don't understand. Pause before you act, especially when the consequences aren't immediately visible. And maybe most importantly, if someone warns you, even if you think they're overreacting, even if it bruises your ego a little, just listen, because the cost of being wrong might not show up right away, but when it does, it shows up all at once. And I'm curious what you think. Was this just a dumb mistake? Or was it something deeper, ego, control, that need to be right even when the stakes are high? Because we've all seen people like this, maybe we've even been that person once or twice. So drop your thoughts in the comments. I actually read them. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who thought they knew better than everyone else, hit like. You're definitely not alone. And yeah, maybe next time you see a random wire in your yard, you'll think twice before grabbing the bolt cutters.